World War II, 1939 to 1945. World War II was the worst war in history and killed more people than any other war before. It lasted from 1939 to 1945, and starting out from Europe spread to nearly every part of the world. About 17 million soldiers died during 6 years of the war. Even more civilians, men, women and children died from bomb attacks, illnesses or starvation. Millions of Jews died in German concentration camps. The war left many other people without jobs and homes. Many cities and industries in Europe and Asia were completely destroyed by bombs and large areas of land were devastated. Causes of war. There are many causes of the war and some of them go back to the end of the First World War. The end of World War I and the peace that followed in 1919 changed the face of Europe and the borders of countries completely. New nations emerged. The countries that lost the war, especially Germany and Austria, had to give up a lot of land. They also had to pay money to other countries for the damages that happened during the war. Economic problems. After the war many countries were in debt. The losers had problems paying reparations and the winners borrowed a lot of money from the United States which they could not pay back. Inflation in many countries left people without any savings. In the 1930s the Great Depression, starting out in the USA, spread to Europe and stopped the continent's recovery. Millions of people were out of work and poverty rose. Political movements. The problems after the war made the governments in many countries weaker and weaker. Two movements became more and more powerful. Communism, known as the left, called for a revolution of the working class. Fascism, known as the right, wanted a strong national government. The Axis and Allied powers. Two groups of nations fought against each other during the Second World War. During the 1930s Germany, Italy and Japan led a group of nations called the Axis. The leaders of these countries were dictators. They wanted their own countries to grow and others to become weaker. In the years before the beginning of World War II all three Axis powers had strengthened and modernized their armies. In the 1930s the Nazi Party rose to power in Germany. In 1933 the party's leader Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor and became known as Der Führer. He promised to take revenge on the countries that had defeated Germany in the First World War and make Germany the most powerful country in the world. He also claimed that only Germans were the true race and wanted to get rid of Jews, communists and other weaker people. In Italy, Benito Mussolini, known as the Il Duce, became the leader of the fascist party, which gained many supporters. He promised to bring law and order to the country and help solve its economic problems. The Axis powers invaded other countries and expanded their territory. At the beginning of the 1930s Japan invaded Manchuria because it had a lot of raw materials. In 1938 it attacked China and later on expanded to Southeast Asia. In 1935 Italy took over Ethiopia. Germany started its conquest of foreign territories by invading Austria. Italy and Germany also sent soldiers to help another dictator, Francisco Franco, in the Spanish Civil War. The Allies were made up of a total of 50 countries. They were led by Great Britain, the Soviet Union, France, China and the United States and opposed the Axis. The beginning of the war. On the 30th of September 1938 Great Britain, France and Germany signed the Munich Agreement. It gave Germany the right to take over the Sudetenland, a part of Czechoslovakia. The two allies hoped it would satisfy Hitler and keep them out of the war. The agreement, however, was broken and Hitler not only invaded the Sudetenland but took over all of Czechoslovakia. It was clear that Poland, on Germany's eastern border, would be the next target. Great Britain and France promised to help Poland if it were attacked. In August 1939 Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact, in which they promised not to attack each other. Germany did this so that it would not have to fight on two fronts. On the 1st of September 1939 Germany invaded Poland and World War II had begun. Rise of Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was born in Braunau, Austria on the 20th of April 1889 and spent most of his childhood in Linz. He was not a very good student and dreamt of becoming a painter. In 1913 he moved to Munich and volunteered for the German army when World War I broke out. Germany lost the war and the Treaty of Versailles punished the country very strictly. It lost its overseas colonies and had to give up its Sarcole region to France. It was only allowed to have a small army and building ships was forbidden. The treaty also made Germany pay a lot of money to Great Britain and France for the damage caused by the war. Hitler was angry at the Allies because he thought they had treated his homeland in an unfair way. In 1923 Adolf Hitler tried to overthrow the German government. He failed and had to go to prison for 9 months. There he wrote his book Mein Kampf. In it he looked for solutions to Germany's problems. By January 1933 Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist Party took over power. He became a dictator, a leader with complete control and created the Third Reich. The Nazis acted quickly against everyone who was against them. They outlawed all other political parties. People who opposed the new government were often murdered. Once in control he started persecuting the Jews. He also began strengthening the German army and creating jobs for the population. This made him increasingly popular among many Germans. By 1944 the war was going badly for Hitler and the Third Reich. Some of his officers wanted to end the war and save the country from destruction. They tried to kill him by planting a bomb in his office, but Hitler escaped without injuries. Eventually he realized that Germany had lost the war. He committed suicide on the 30th of April, 1945 in Berlin. Eva Braun, his mistress, died with him. The Blitzkrieg. On the 1st of September 1939 Germany invaded Poland and World War II began. At the same time the Soviet Union attacked Poland from the east. It was divided up among the countries before the Allies were able to help. Germany's attack was carried out with fast tanks and troops that were supported by warplanes. Because the German army moved very quickly, this phase of the war was called Blitzkrieg. In the following spring Germany invaded Norway and Denmark. Both countries were occupied by the German army by June. On the 10th of May 1940 Hitler's troops invaded the Low Countries, Belgium, the Netherlands and Luxembourg, and days later they surrendered. In the middle of May German soldiers crossed into France and by the 14th of June the Germans had entered Paris. On the 22nd of June France signed a peace agreement with Germany. German forces then occupied northern France and the Atlantic coast. A new government that was friendly to the Germans was formed in Vichy. On the other side General Charles de Gaulle escaped to Great Britain and started his Free French movement. In a radio broadcasts he urged the French people to fight against the Germans. The Battle of Britain. Hitler next wanted to invade the island of Great Britain. He attacked the British Air Force in order to control the skies over the island. It was history's first major air battle. In June 1940, the German Luftwaffe began bombing airfields and other targets in southern England. German warplanes attacked from airports in France. At the end of the battle the British had shot down about 1,700 German planes. Hitler saw that he could not defeat England's air force, so he gave up his idea of invading Britain. Instead he sent the Luftwaffe to bomb British cities and towns. In London alone, more than 12,000 civilians were killed. Battle of the Atlantic. During the war Great Britain got most of its food, war materials and other supplies from North America. Throughout the war Germany tried to destroy the ships that brought goods to the island. German U-boats or submarines were the biggest threat to the British Navy. At first these U-boats were very successful in tracking down British cargo ships and sinking them. They often attacked in groups called wolf packs. To survive such attacks British ships traveled in groups called convoys. They were protected by destroyers and also supported by planes. As time went on America gave British ships more and more protection. In 1943 the Allies began to escort the convoys with small aircraft carriers. The planes that could take off from the carriers and long-range bombers from land began to attack and destroy more and more German submarines. The Allies began winning the sea war also because they started using an underwater radar system called sonar to find the submarines. By the middle of 1943 the Allies were sinking German U-boats faster than they could replace them. The Holocaust. Under Adolf Hitler, the National Socialist German Workers' Party became very powerful in Germany from 1933 to 1945. The Nazis, as they were called, wanted to get rid of people who they thought were not as good as they were. They especially hated Jews and thought they were evil. At the beginning they made life hard for the Jews in Germany and all over Europe. Later on, they decided to kill them. This mass killing was called the Holocaust. After 1939 about 6 million Jews were killed in the countries that Hitler controlled. But Jewish people were not the only ones murdered by the Nazis. Gypsies, homosexuals, mentally and physically disabled people and others who were against Hitler were killed in the Holocaust. Hating Jews and treating them badly is called antisemitism. Hitler started this as soon as he became Chancellor of Germany in 1933. Jews lost their jobs and their shops were closed and often destroyed. In 1935 the Nazis passed a new law. Jews were no longer citizens of Germany and they were not allowed to marry other Germans. They lost all of their rights. Every Jew had to wear a yellow Star of David. Many Jews were afraid of Hitler and tried to escape before World War II started. On the 9th of November and 10th, 1938 the Nazis destroyed all Jewish synagogues and other public places the Jews went to. This event was called the Kristallnacht or Night of Broken Glass. Soon thousands of Jews were arrested and locked up in special camps. Others had to live in overcrowded parts of cities called ghettos where they got nothing to eat and suffered from many diseases. The most famous ghetto was in Warsaw, Poland. About 500,000 Jews had to live in an area that usually was home for 10,000 people. By 1943 only 70,000 had survived. The Nazis decided that they had to solve what they called the Jewish problem once and for all. On the 20th of January 1942 the Nazi leaders met at the Wannsee Conference near Berlin and decided that all Jews should be killed. All across Central Europe the Nazis built special death or concentration camps to kill Jews and other people who were not worth of living. The biggest camps were built in Poland. Some well-known camps were Auschwitz, Treblinka, Dachau, Sobibor and Belzec. At first, the outside world thought that these camps were places where Jews and other prisoners had to work. A sign reading "Arbeit markt frei" hung over the gate at Auschwitz. Those who were lucky became slaves. They had to work hard and didn't get enough to eat. Some of them died of starvation. Most of the Jews, however, were brought to the gas chambers that often looked like big showers. There they were killed with poison gas, then taken away and burned. Although the countries that fought against Hitler knew about the death camps, there wasn't anything they could do about them. Many Europeans who were against Hitler's ideas tried to help the Jews. They often hid them, gave them false documents and helped them escape. A famous book called The Diary of Anne Frank tells the story of a Jewish girl whose family hid in Amsterdam for 2 years but were then caught. Hitler killed himself shortly before the war was over because he realized that he had lost the war. When it ended in 1945, Allied soldiers entered Germany. They liberated the concentration camps but were shocked when they saw what had happened there. Jews who survived the Holocaust had no place to go. They waited to find a new home. In 1948, the United Nations decided to give homeless Jews a new place to live. The State of Israel was founded and hundreds of thousands of European Jews went there to start a new life. In many countries memorials have been built to remember those who died. Museums in Europe and America try to show what happened over 60 years ago and help our generation understand the horrors of the Second World War. World War II. End of Part 1. Continued in World War II Part 2.